Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. I am Higher Power Historian and I use philosophical teachings from different traditions to address complex challenges in just a few minutes. Today I'm going to talk about over-identification and obsession. We'll define over-identification as being really fixated on one aspect of your identity or experience, which can easily lead to an obsession with it. If you're somebody who often puts unrealistic expectations on yourself, has experienced trauma, is going through a hard time, or really anybody who has ever made a human mistake, a painful event can take center stage in your brain. You might be constantly thinking about it, feeling bad about it, unintentionally letting it infiltrate your every thought and action. Some examples could be a rocky relationship, a frustrating job, a single bad experience. But consider this perspective shift. We consist, and we only can consist, of interdependent parts. We don't and can't exist in any one isolated aspect of our experience unless we choose to identify with it so obsessively that we neglect everything else in the picture. To understand this concept, let's look at the questions of King Milinda. This is a Buddhist text from some time between 100 BC and 200 AD that reads as a dialogue between King Milinda, a Greek king who ruled territory in northwest India and synced aspects of Hellenistic culture with the Buddhist religion, and Nagasena, a Buddhist sage. Nagasena the sage doesn't identify at all with anything. Building from a key concept in Buddhism, the non-self, he insists that his own name, Nagasena, is simply a sound, a designation for convenience. It doesn't explain any permanent, clearly defined essence. In other words, there is no fundamental Nagasena encapsulated by the name Nagasena. Unsurprisingly, King Milinda is quick to ask, then who does this or that? Who performs good deeds or bad deeds? If someone killed you, would there be no murder? Yet Nagasena denies being equated with his body parts, his sensations, his ideas, and even these things combined. And to explain himself, he gives the following analogy of a chariot. Going through the different components of a chariot, he asks King Milinda, is the pole the chariot? Is the wheel the chariot? Are the ropes the chariot? King Milinda answers no to each question and ultimately has to concede that each individual piece is not the chariot, that all those things together still aren't the chariot, and yet there can be no chariot external to these parts. A pole, a wheel, and a rope are simply a pole, a wheel, and a rope unless we put them together and use them in the specific way that we believe makes up a chariot. You could keep going and say that what we believe to be a chariot still depends on the presence and functions of innumerable other parts, including somebody to drive the chariot, somebody who knows how to assemble the chariot having somewhere to go, earth to travel on. Otherwise, is it still a chariot? Ultimately, we choose the name chariot for our conception of something that has these parts working together in a particular way. Similarly, we apply the name Nagasena for our concept of someone that has certain components, like organic matter, form, consciousness, experiences, working together in a certain way at a single point in time. But when you isolate these parts, there is no fixed, fundamental, clearly defined Nagasena that remains, just like there's no chariot remaining when you break it into the pole, the wheels, and the rope. So let's apply this analogy to our present day, thinking about when we have the tendency to over-identify with any one aspect of our experience. I'll take the example of a bad breakup. All I can think about is how upsetting this breakup is, and how bad it makes me feel. But I can run a little chariot exercise on myself and ask, what is making me me right now? Of course, the breakup is going to be an obvious component, it's difficult and insurmountable. But what else do I find in my construction when I make it a point to look? Other painful things, certainly, but maybe a compliment from a friend or teacher that made me feel good, maybe a success I had in work or study, maybe an exciting trip I took. And certainly these things are going to be made up of even smaller components themselves. And certainly these things need to be paired with countless other things in order to come together somehow in some particular way to constitute me, whoever I'm choosing to be at this point in time. Me being me, whoever that person is at a given moment, depends on an inexhaustive list of parts and processes that can be assembled and reassembled and substituted and interpreted any which way, and each of these would result in a different me. This could seem scary, but it's also quite freeing. Because when we broke down the chariot, could the chariot exist solely in the wheel? No. Can I exist in the breakup? No. Can I exist in my breakup plus being a musician plus liking ice cream sitting there side by side unassembled? Again, no. It's the process, how I choose to bring those things and all the other things they depend on together into conversation that would get somebody to say, okay, now that's what we call a chariot, and that's what we call me. Which is great news. The person I am right now in this second might feel controlled by the breakup, but if I change how it is used in my construction, I create the version of me who utilizes it in a more empowering way. Remember, the chariot needs the wheel, but how do we want to use that wheel effectively? And when there is so much else at play, it isn't necessary to stay focused on the wheel. Instead of obsessively directing my attention to the wheel, inadvertently becoming it, I can focus on the horse. So instead of shrinking to my breakup, I can focus on my love for the outdoors. I don't have to over-identify, obsess over, inhabit any one aspect, because like a chariot, I simply can't be found in one aspect. And so the manner with which all the me things get used is up to me. So now I'd like to hear from you, what is one aspect of your identity that you now feel empowered to stop over-identifying with? How can you apply this aspect differently, or what's another aspect where you can bring your attention? Let me know in the comments.